because he just said that the entire purpose of his opening was to question my epistemology. I am irrelevant, and my epistemology is irrelevant to whether or not there is evidence of God. And if you demand that the first hour be on, is there evidence for God, and you do not address that topic and admit that instead you've decided to go with a different topic, you have defaulted, and I rest my case.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've stumbled across this absolutely wild debate between Matt Dillahunty, one of the most well-known atheist debaters out there, and Daniel Hakikachu, an Islamic apologist. And let me tell you, this gets heated. They're supposed to be debating whether there's evidence for God, but what actually happens is Daniel spends his entire opening avoiding the question. And when Matt calls him out on it, Daniel literally admits he wasn't even trying to present evidence. It's honestly one of the most revealing moments I've seen in a religious debate. So make sure you watch until the end, because at around the 30-minute mark, Matt absolutely dismantles Daniel's entire strategy. And please comment down below where you're watching from. I really love to see people from all over the world connecting in here. All right, now let's get into the video.
So that's an interesting diatribe on the problems of analytic and reasoning. Where was the evidence for God? That was the entire first part was, is there evidence of God? And I didn't hear not only any objectively verifiable empirical evidence for God, I didn't even hear any intuitive evidence for God, just a lot about the value of intuition and how evidently as an atheist, I'm all about military power, which I generally despise despite having done 8 years in the military. And that's not consistent with my secular humanism, and nothing that I could view as evidence of God.
No, the whole point was to question your standards.
That wasn't the subject of the debate.
Hey, I didn't interrupt you when you called what I said a diatribe. Let's try to be civil here.
I'm trying to be civil.
Then don't interrupt me. Then
well,
please
don't
interrupt.
Interruption is
don't interrupt me,
uncivil. Okay.
So as I was saying, the whole point of this opening is to question your standards of evidence. If you want to say that, well, there's no scientific evidence, when we do experiments and open the microscope and look at in the beaker, we don't see God, then I can concede that. So what's the point of that point that your opening was about? My opening was to take the discussion to a higher level of what are our standards? What is our epistemology? You're assuming a atheistic epistemology that I don't accept, and the most people in history and even today don't accept. So that's point number one. As opposed to as for evidence of intuitions that people believe in God, we'll talk about it in the next part of the debate. But this is something that's established. There's a natural theology that is established within the cognitive science of religion, that people have intuitions about spirit beings, they have intuitions about a purpose to creation, they have intuitions about there being an afterlife. These are all things that are established within the cognitive science of religion.
Is that a pause for me?
Yes.
Cool. So I wanted to do a debate on Islam versus secular humanism and which one's better for the world, but Daniel didn't want that. And then James kept coming back to me with potential topics for a debate. And I pointed out various problems with them and everything else. And then finally, I gave up. And just the 3 different topics that he wanted over 3 hours is what I agreed to. And so I'm given a list of topics. And topic 1 is there evidence of God? I rest my case because he just said that the entire purpose of his opening was to question my epistemology. I am irrelevant, and my epistemology is irrelevant to whether or not there is evidence of God. And if you demand that the first hour be on, is there evidence for God, and you do not address that topic and admit that instead you've decided to go with a different topic, you have defaulted, and I rest my case.
No, it's the same exact topic. If you have a debate topic, part of the debate is to analyze the topic and the assumptions that go into one position or another. I'm analyzing the assumptions that go into the first sentence or the second sentence that you had was that this kind of scientific analysis is the best route to truth. I am objecting to that and proposing an alternative. Well, how about you explain to us and justify why it's the best route to truth?
Because the subject of the debate is there evidence of God?
Yeah, how do we determine that? You're asserting that it has to be scientific evidence?
The subject of the debate is there evidence for God? My answer is no. And I talked about what sort of evidence I would accept or not accept. I didn't say anything at all about shutting down intuition. I didn't say that intuition should be sidelined or less important, or
You did.
or that it has no. I thought we were done interrupting. Or that it has no importance. I didn't do any of the things that he asserted. And not only did he not present any evidence of God for us to address, but he fully acknowledged that that was not the purpose of his opening statement. I rest my case.
So where's the evidence that the external world exists?
That's not the subject of the debate either.
I want to know, like, your standards of evidence for God, do they have any meaning outside of that particular question in the very specific way that you've defined it to set the debate up in your favor? Is there anything else that is scientifically verifiable, like the external world,
Yes.
like the principle of non-contradiction? Please give me the
Sorry.
evidence, the objectively verifiable evidence that the law of non-contradiction is true.
That's not the subject of this debate either. And after being accused of setting this up so that it would be easy for me to win, after acknowledging he chose these topics that I did not want to address, and now it turns out that he also does not want to address, I don't know what to do. James?
No, there's plenty of evidence. There's plenty of if you ask people
Start
for
presenting.
evidence, if you ask people for evidence of God, they will point to their sense that God exists. They will point to their sense that when they look at the world, they see it as being created by a supreme being for a purpose. When you ask people about any number of things that are not scientific, they will have a tendency to answer in specific ways. These are studied within the cognitive science of religion and psychology generally. If you ask people for evidence of the external world or basic arithmetic propositions, there's a tendency to answer in consistent ways in a universal fashion. What this tells us is that the human mind has a certain structure, it works in a certain way. And we have to understand the human mind in order to ask questions about morality, religion, aesthetics, logic, mathematics, all of these, science, right? Empirical data, all of these things have to be understood with reference to human psychology. So it's not irrelevant to the debate. It's actually a core first step of being able to debate evidence for anything, let alone evidence for God.
So what we just heard was that if you ask people, they'll tell you that they believe in a God. Some of them may even say they intuit it. I'm still asking and still waiting for a demonstration of evidence for God. That's evidence that people believe in God. And if you just said, hey, I want to debate whether or not people believe in God, I'd say, why would we do that? I clearly agree that people believe in God. I used to believe in God, but I didn't do it necessarily because of intuition, although some people might do it for intuitional reasons. Some people might think that they're doing it for good evidence reasons. But when I found out that I didn't have good evidence, and when I found out that intuitions could be wrong, and if you're going to have intuitions about, I don't know, whether or not the restaurant's going to be busy, that's probably based on past experience and data that you're just using your gut to assess. And so what you're describing as potentially intuition there isn't actually intuition, but is based on data. But we don't have any data that I'm aware of for God. We don't have any evidence that I'm aware of for God. You haven't presented any, and that's the subject of the first hours of debate.
This is one of those moments where you can see the entire argument fall apart in real time. Avery asks a simple question. He's not trying to be tricky. He's not setting some elaborate trap. He just asks, if I give you permission to drive my car, who's driving it, me or you? And watch what happens. The Muslim panelist actually says, Avery, what was a transmission song, bro? Technically you are, because you are giving me permission. Let me say that again. He claims that if Avery gives someone permission to drive, then Avery is the one driving, not the person behind the wheel, not the person controlling the car, but the person who gave permission. You can hear Avery's reaction when he says, I'm so happy to be back, bro. This is, I love, oh my gosh. Because this is the kind of answer that tells you everything. When your argument forces you to deny basic reality, when you have to claim that giving someone permission to do something means you're the one doing it, you've already lost. Here's why this matters so much. The Quran says Jesus created birds from clay by Allah's permission. The Muslim position is trying to say, well, that doesn't make Jesus a creator because he needed permission. But Avery just exposed the fatal flaw in that logic, because permission and ability are two completely different things. Think about it this way. If I give you permission to use my phone, did I give you the ability to read? No, you already knew how to read. The permission just allowed you to access something. The ability was already there. So when Allah gives Jesus permission to create life, that doesn't mean Allah gave him the ability. It means Jesus already had that ability and Allah permitted him to use it. And this is where it gets really interesting from a Christian perspective, because what Avery is building toward here, and you can see it coming, is that Jesus possessing the inherent ability to create life is a divine attribute. You don't just learn how to create life. You don't develop that skill. That's something only God can do. The panel keeps trying to dodge this by saying, well, it's by Allah's permission, so it doesn't count. But Avery already cornered them. He got them to admit, I permitted you to drive. You are the driver. So even by their own admission, when someone gets permission, they are the one doing the action, which means when Jesus gets permission to create, Jesus is the creator. This is textbook logical consistency. And you can tell the Muslim side knows they're in trouble because they're starting to stutter, they're trying to change subjects, they're bringing up completely different analogies. That's what happens when someone dismantles your core argument and you have nowhere left to go.
Intuitions are evidence. Intuitions are evidence. Just because you don't accept them, that doesn't mean that they're not evidence. There are different types of intuitions. I didn't say all intuitions are equally compelling. There are some intuitions that are so compelling that no one has questioned them for most of human history, like the intuition that there is an external world, for example, or the intuition regarding the law of non-contradiction, certain moral intuitions like it is wrong to harm people. People have universally had this intuition. Why? Because every moral system, every religion that we see has this principle in it, implicitly or explicitly, that it is wrong to harm people without reason. That is evidence of its truth insofar as the human mind is capable of accessing the truth. That's the point. And the belief in God is also one of these very strong intuitions that human beings have that they develop from childhood. So that is evidence. You don't accept it as evidence. That's my point.
Boy, have I got some surprises for you. Daniel seems to think that nobody's questioned reality. Evidently you've never heard of solipsism. And the
For most of history was
Are
what
you
I
interrupting me again? What's good for the goose? Solipsism, and the study of this within philosophy, is something that is robustly argued all over. It's almost argued more than whether or not atheists can be rocks or whether or not tacos are sandwiches. Solipsism is the issue of, can we trust? And do we know that the outside world that we think is the outside world that we experience, is it the real true world? And as far as I'm aware, there is no solution to the problem of hard solipsism. But when you say that people's intuitions about God count as evidence, as I was pointing out, whether you're going to have objectively verifiable facts or objectively verifiable empirical evidence or not, at a minimum, the evidence that you demonstrate someone's intuition, if you want to claim that's evidence, you have to make a demonstration to show how that intuition is consistent with a specific God concept and excludes other God concepts, and how we can demonstrate that it is probably correct. And you haven't done any of that. You've just asserted that people have intuitions about God and that we shouldn't dismiss them. I didn't say we should.
Sorry, you've asserted from the beginning in your opening statement that the route, I think you used the word route, to understanding reality and truth is through this kind of scientific analytic investigation.
What do you want?
You asserted that. So why can't you just justify that? Why can't you tell us why we should accept that standard?
Because the first hour of this debate is not, is Matt's epistemology sound? Is there evidence?
Yes, it is. The whole debate.
No, it's not.
The whole debate is about who's epistemology.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Meanwhile, what I said is that scientific inquiry is the most consistently reliable pathway to demonstrably understanding reality. I didn't say that intuition couldn't get you to the right answer. Intuitions need to be demonstrated in their reliability because the wise person, as Hume would teach us, proportions their confidence to the evidence. You can have intuitions and they might be right, but the way to be confident and the way for them to count as good evidence is to show that they are probably right. So asserting that people have intuitions doesn't make them evidence.
Daniel doubles down and says, intuitions are evidence. Intuitions are evidence. Just because you don't accept them, that doesn't mean that they're not evidence. But this completely misses the point. Matt isn't saying intuitions can never lead you to truth. He's saying you need to ver them. You need to test them against reality. Because some intuitions are useful and some are completely wrong. Here's a perfect example. For most of human history, people had the intuition that heavier objects fall faster than lighter objects. It felt true. It seemed obvious. Aristotle believed it. Everyone believed it. And they were all wrong. Galileo demonstrated that in a vacuum, all objects fall at the same rate regardless of mass. The intuition was wrong. So when Daniel says intuitions are evidence, he's conflating the feeling of certainty with actual truth. Those are not the same thing. Matt brings up solipsism, which is the philosophical problem of whether we can even prove the external world exists. And watch Daniel's response. Matt says, "Boy, if I got some surprises for you, Daniel. Seems to think that nobody's questioned reality. I don't. Evidently, you've never heard of solipsism." This is important because Daniel keeps claiming that Matt accepts certain things without empirical proof. So why not accept God the same way? But Matt is explaining that solipsism is a completely different category of claim. The external world is a necessary presupposition to do any investigation at all. God is not a necessary presupposition. God is a claim about reality. Then we get to this absolutely ridiculous moment where they just start talking over each other. Daniel says something, Matt says no it's not, Daniel says yes it is, Matt says yes it is back sarcastically, and it just devolves into chaos. This is what happens when someone realizes they're losing the argument and they just refuse to let the other person make their point. It's honestly embarrassing to watch. When Matt finally gets to speak, he says, "Scientific inquiry is the most consistently reliable pathway to demonstrably understanding reality." Notice the careful language. He's not saying it's the only way. He's not saying intuition has zero value. He's saying science has the best track record for discovering what's actually true versus what we want to be true. And Daniel has no response except to keep deflecting to other topics.
It doesn't make them reliable, and it doesn't mean that people's intuitions about whether the God is a Christian God, a Scientologist God, a Hindu God, a Muslim God, or some other God that nobody's proposed as any demonstration that it's likely to be correct. And this hour of the debate is supposed to be about evidence of God. I still am waiting.
So your standard of evidence takes out all moral claims, moral truths, I'll say, actually, because I do believe it is a moral truth that harming others for no reason is wrong. I can't demonstrate that. I can't bring you peer-reviewed studies to establish that. I do believe that the law of non-contradiction is true. I can't bring you scientific evidence for that. I can't demonstrate that in a proof. I do believe that the external world exists. I cannot demonstrate that through a proof. I can't bring you scientific evidence for that. All of those things and much more. Basic mathematical truths, basic aesthetic truths, like eating human flesh is disgusting. That is a truth. And I will stand by that. But there's no scientific result that will say that is true. But it is true. That is reality. We all have these universal truths that we abide by in understanding reality. But none of that has to do with scientific evidence. None of that has to do with having this kind of deductive proof. Yet it's still true. Yet it's still a reality. What the atheist does, and in general, not just Matt, the atheist says that, well, none of that is really real. And we don't need to talk about that. Let's just talk about what is scientific. But this is a drastic, violent limitation on reality that the vast majority of humanity, not only today, but throughout history, doesn't share. People don't have this scientific reductionist view of reality.
So if you go back to the beginning of my opening statement, not the Mitch McConnell joke, which was really good, by the way, But if you go back to the beginning where I was describing things, in addition to talking about the nature of evidence and everything else, I think I specifically pointed out that there are things where we're not going to be able to point to empirical evidence. And I think I used morality as an example for that, to suggest that I am tossing those things out is not remotely accurate. And I guess you just missed part of my opening. But my opening was about evidence of God, not about competing epistemologies. So I'm still waiting.
Well, the difference is when it comes to morality, I'll stand up and say, this is true. And it's not something that I can doubt. If I doubt it, I doubt my reality. But your position, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that morality is something that we can't have objectively verifiable facts about. Our positions are not the same on morality. My position is shared by the vast majority of human beings. Like, no one even questions that. That's people's reality.
I doubt reality. I doubt many things that I intuitively feel about reality. And yes, our view on morality is very different, with something I'm sure we'll get to in a little while, which everybody is already aware of. When it comes to moral truths, or let's say the law of non-contradiction, identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle, the foundations of logical thinking, are presuppositions. We can't demonstrate that they're true because you'd have to.
Daniel makes one final attempt to corner Matt by bringing up morality. He says, your standard of evidence takes out all moral claims. Moral truths, I'll say, actually. Because I do believe it is a moral truth that harming others for no reason is wrong. I can't demonstrate that. He's trying to create a gotcha moment. If Matt can't scientifically prove morality, then God should get a pass too, right? Wrong. Here's why this fails completely. Moral claims are prescriptive. They're about what we should do, how we should organize society, what values we should prioritize. God claims are descriptive. They're about what is. They're about what exists in reality. These are fundamentally different categories, and Daniel is intentionally mixing them together. When I say harming innocent people is wrong, I'm not making a claim about physics or biology. I'm making a claim about human values and how we want to structure our society. But when Daniel says God exists, he is making a claim about reality itself. And claims about reality require evidence. They require verification. They need to be tested. Daniel tries to lump everything together by saying, none of that has to do with scientific evidence. None of that has to do with having this kind of deductive proof. Yet it's still true. Yet it's still a reality. But this is incredibly sloppy thinking. Just because some true things can't be scientifically proven doesn't mean all unprovable claims are therefore true. That's not how logic works. Matt addresses this beautifully when he points out, I think I specifically pointed out that there are things where we're not going to be able to point to empirical evidence, and I think I used morality as an example for that. He never said morality doesn't exist. He never said logic doesn't exist. He said those operate in different ways than factual claims about reality. And Daniel trying to sneak God into that protected category is exactly the kind of intellectual dishonesty that makes these debates so frustrating. Because at the end of the day, we're over 30 minutes into a debate about whether there's evidence for God, and the person defending God's existence has spent the entire time trying to convince us we shouldn't need evidence. That tells you everything you need to know. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.